thank you for this, and thanks. It's great to see so many people actually sort of attending sort of this session. INFACT, the clue's in the name really. It stands for Innovative, Non-Invasive and Fully Acceptable Exploration Technologies. Over 3 years, a group of sort of partners from around Europe have been focusing on the technology. We've been looking at sort of drones, helicopters, all sorts of sort of innovative sort of geophysical techniques. But alongside that, in parallel, been focusing on the acceptability and what defines acceptability and what needs to be done for exploration to be acceptable within a European context. The project's focused Europe-wide, but it has sort of gone into sort of rabbit holes really, or focused in on sort of three sort of reference areas, one in Finland, one in Germany, and one in Spain. So while we've been looking at acceptability sort of across the continent, we've also been sort of focusing deep down on sort of what is required within these three areas, and they're very different. One is sort of a post-mining area, one is a current mining area, and one is an exploration area within a Natura 2000 site, which makes it quite special and sort of requires lots and lots of considerations sort of from an environmental and a social perspective. In terms of acceptability, the barriers and challenges that we've found over the 3 years have been sort of fivefold. Existing land use comes up again and again and again, whether that be land use that's for recreation purposes or for agriculture or other industry. The negative perceptions of exploration and mining, those have just grown throughout the project, with the last year of the project actually, not our project, but other EU projects sort of doing sort of similar sort of research, having sort of open letters written about them to the European Commission, complaining about sort of social aspects and the lack of engagement, and complaining about exploration and mining in Europe. And this is quite pertinent and important really, because for the first time in Europe, you've had networks of dissenters against mining, range from sort of projects in Northern Ireland through to Finland, through to Romania, sort of working together and collaborating together to cohesively to complain against mining. The cost of mineral exploration, this is also an important issue. Most of the mining in Europe is not publicly listed. It tends to be sort of private sort of funding, and that funding is hard to come by. And so the role of the resources and reporting codes within that is something which is I think is very relevant to the discussion today. Environmental concerns continue, that they always have been, and I think they always will be there. But European legislation is incredibly robust in terms of environmental concerns. And then governance processes. You have the EU legislation, but then you have subsidiarity and you have the national sort of legislation. And for the most of Europe, and in particular the most of the EU states, they are members of the OECD, which means that what is known sort of in sort of other parts of the world as good international industry practice doesn't necessarily apply, and national planning law is what determines the sort of the regulatory process or the planning process or the permissions sort of for mining in a European context. And so then people sort of get caught up then between what's required locally and then within the EU, and it is seen as incredibly complex and a bit of a minefield for projects sort of to navigate. So looking at sort of all of these sort of barriers, sort of from the social aspects of the project, so we've sort of focused in and sort of we've pulled together sort of a vision for what is required for mining to be acceptable within a European context. And within this vision, we focused on three sort of overarching areas: the governance and the regulation, which I've alluded to already, society and community, which I'm not going to talk about today because that would take the whole of the 2 hours, but then the finance and the industry. And where the reporting codes sit sort of really within that finance and industry sort of sector, sort of what is done, what is their role actually in sort of, I suppose, opening sort of gateways to finance. How we plan to do this, we've pulled together a roadmap. It's a 3-year roadmap, and it's sort of been submitted to the EU this afternoon in between these two sort of round tables. And it's cohesive, but again, it focuses on the governance and regulatory aspects, the community and society aspects, and the finance and industry aspects. And sort of the reporting codes, in particular PERC, the Pan-European sort of reporting code, is sort of features within that roadmap. So looking really at a project development sequence, this is something that'll be familiar to all of you here. And so I'm not going to sort of dwell on this too much, but this is sort of the standard process, I think, in sort of in most jurisdictions, in terms of where sort of mineral resources reporting and reserves reporting sort of fits sort of within the scheme. But looking at how decisions are made, one of the things we did, and in fact, we took a step back and we actually looked sort of at the standard route and looked at where decisions, especially decisions in relation to environmental, social and governance factors or modifying factors or considerations sort of should be. And really from an exploration or from a mine life sort of cycle perspective, we really advocate that ESG considerations should be right at the beginning of the process. So pulling this quickly then back to the reserves, there are 14 codes out there at the moment. And I think over the course of today, we'll have spoken with, I think, at least 12 of them through the roundtables, which is amazing. Some of them have been updated quite recently. Some of them have not been updated for quite a long time, but are in that process now of exploring what to do and where and how to do it. So we're really excited from a European perspective to sort of, I've personally been involved sort of in the PERC sort of review and update, which is ongoing at the moment, and that's been fantastic. But we're excited sort of to hear from all of the other codes to see what you're doing, how you're doing it, what you can share in terms of incorporating ESG and extending them through the modifying factors from the beginning of exploration through to the end. So I look forward to hearing from you all now. Thank you.